K3soju has done it again. He's hit rank 1 in North America playing one of his favorite comps, Emissary Flex. It's a composition that's really expensive and requires precise management of resources of both your gold and your items. If you played the previous set 12 Magic and Mayhem, it reminds me a lot of the Karma Fiora Gwen Preserver comp, where it caps really high, but you definitely need a lot of resources to manage it correctly. So in this episode of In Too Deep, we're gonna hop on board with the captain of the Boeing 0777 to see just how it's done. Let's quickly break down Emissary Flex in a nutshell. You're always going to be playing these 4 emissaries, and you're always going to want to aim to itemize Mbessa and Garen. If you're going to play 4 emissaries and you don't itemize them, then what's the point? And then you're going to be picking a package based on what you hit and trying to play around it. The most common package you'll be playing is the Artillerist around Corki, and you really want to flex around the fact that Corki links with Gangplank as a Pit Fighter and Form Swapper, and then you get a Swain, which is a cheap Form Swapper and Sorcerer link here, and Twist of Fate is the Quick Striker for the Mbessa. You can also play Form Swappers, which caps really high, and you basically put like the Last Whisper, i.e. Shojin on Jace, and you have him be the AD carry. This is something that you do when you hit Jace early, and Corki's really contested. It also allows you to cap really, really high. And it's also a really easy variation to play because it's just 4 Form Swapper, 4 emissaries, and that's it. Sentinels are starting to see a lot more popularity to splash in. This is like one concept you can play if you hit a Rumble early and you want to play around Rumble and Rel. Rel is a Conquer that leads into Mbessa, and then you could play like any Quick Striker, and then you have the Sorcerer Watcher link through here. Let's say you hit Vi 2 and you have a complete melee setup. You can play around Vi, Savika, and then Twist of Fate is the Enforcer for Vi and the Quick Striker for Mbessa, and then Darius is the Conqueror for the Mbessa, while also being the Watcher for Garen. You don't have to memorize all of this. This is just to demonstrate that the web is very dynamic and you can play off of a lot of traits as long as you're always activating the traits off of Mbessa and your main carry. For your opener, make sure you have a 2-1 econ start and slammable items. If you're playing on things like Scuttle Puddle and Ghost Description, it's probably more okay to skip an econ augment and take something like items or combat. Essentially, all the best AD slams are oriented around Sword, Infinity Edge, Deathblade, Edge of Night, BT, they're all good, and you want to have any mixture of range and melee items. In the ideal world, you're slamming similar types. You don't want like one range, one melee. You want double melee or double range. That's because items multiply off each other. You don't want to be stuck in a situation where one unit has a Bloodthirster and then the backline unit has the Infinity Edge. You'd rather have Bloodthirster Titans, or you'd rather have Last Whisper Infinity Edge. Here are the best AD item holders in the early game. Draven, Maddie, and Tristana end up doing really well. And then for melee, Darius, Violet, and Nocturne are fantastic. And of course, you want to activate traits around them. So if you're playing around Draven, try to go for Conquer. If you're playing around Nocturne, try to activate Automaton and Quick Striker. And then in the ideal world, win streak all of Stage 2 and focus on your economy because you're going to need a ton of econ. Stage 3, I only have 2 tips. One, if you're holding, a lot of pairs, roll on 6 a few times. I've seen too many people do nothing on Stage 2, do nothing on Stage 3, go into Stage 4, roll a bunch of gold, miss, and say, well, there's nothing I could have done. If you're holding pairs, you preserve HP and you win some gold back, and you'll give you more time for you to figure out how to flex around your emissary core. The other is to transition to a 3-cost carry, which is Gangplank and Ezreal, and Gangplank can hold both the range and the melee, so GP1 is quite good early. But if you upgrade them, you absolutely must move them. If they're 1-star, they sometimes are a lot better even than the 2-star. So, I like, for example, Ezreal over Maddie, but that's just a preference. And then stage 4, fast 8 at 4-1 and 4-2. Roll until you at least have 2 4 costs, and then go to 9 for the 5 and 6 costs. For the core that we're talking about with 80 Flex, here are some of the item cores. For Mbessa, and honestly, it applies to Vi, and if you play Vi in the setup, it's basically the same thing. You want to have Edge of Night, healing, and damage. Edge of Night can be replaced maybe with the Titans if you want, but I think it's just worse. And then Hand of Justice is the ideal heal item, but you can play Bloodthirster. And Giant Slayer is just an example of a damage item. You can play Infinity Edge, Deathblade, or maybe even double healing if you want. But the best item, without a doubt, for Mbessa is Trenchcoat. This item is broken on her, so definitely never skip out on it. Quicksilver is also an item I want to shout out, which is also potentially a replacement for Edge of Night. And I've also seen even both Edge of Night and Quicksilver, especially with all the stuns and Victor in the meta. This Quicksilver can be clutch. For Corki, he just wants Last Whisper and AD. So Last Whisper, Infinity Edge, Giant Slayer, Deathblade. And then Gold Collector is his best artifact. You can play Guard Breaker as a way to amplify his crit. It has really good synergy with Infinity Edge, so you can just do that. And you might have extra belts. And then he's also a really good holder of anti-heal. So Morello and Red Buff are surprisingly fine on Corki, but then you're kind of not playing Corki as your primary. He's more of a support DPS. And then Garen just wants all the belts. Warmog, Sunfire, Redemption, You can play Steadfast Heart in him. You can put just another Warmogs, like Warmogs is actually true base Garen. There's a lot of different anomalies you can take, but here are just some to spark your ideas. For Garen, he pretty much anything that gives him HP or things that scale off his HP. So Protective Shielding, which is a good shield, kind of like Light Shield Crest. Deep Roots is one of my favorite anomalies in general, and it's very good on Garen. And then Giant Size, just generically good. Anomalies for Bessa is that she wants something that keeps her either safe or has a lot of utility. Invisibility is just really good on Bessa in general. It's like having multiple Edge of Nights. Some of these numbers are wrong. It's every 6 seconds now, but it just takes a long time for these white subs to update, so just forgive that. Strength Training is something that's surprisingly really good on Bessa because on her second cast, she gains a burst of attack speed and she's a quick striker. You'd be very surprised how much AD you can stack with Strength Training, so don't sleep on it. And then Repulsor, this is a shout out to Leduc. I think there's a little bit of tech with this where you have Repulsor go in and Bessa just stuns and messes with a lot of different units, and honestly is really good disruption. And then if you're playing Corki or any kind of AD carry, don't forget about just the usual stuff. Comeback Story is really good. Attack Expert just gives you way more AD, and that's always good. And then one thing I think is underrated is that if you have a bunch of AD, like, Deathblade and whatnot, Wolf Familiars is also pretty clutch at times. Here are some of the augments that you also think about. Things like items are always good. Econ, either free rerolls or Econ is really good, or artifact fishing. I think all that shimmers is fantastic for a gold augment because it gives you the item tempo early game and it prints you some gold. Although they did nerf it, it's still really good. Any kind of econ, Slammin', Clutter Mine, Reinforcement, these are all econ augments in different forms. But don't forget that you can always take generic gold augments that are combat-based, like Inspiring Epitaph in the late game, because you don't want to just have econ. For Prismatic, the number one thing I would recommend is taking Dark Alley Dealings, because this gives you Trenchcoat and Bessa. It is broken. Coordination is always good. It lets you flex in more traits. Living Forge's artifacts, Going Long is econ, and Lucky Gloves just gives good items on everyone. All right, now that we broke that down, let's go ahead and dive into the gameplay. We're going to hop on board with K3soju's POV. He's currently rank 1 in North America, and the encounter is Mel's Blessing. He looks really excited about that. Mel's Blessing is a cash out reward for when you drop to 40 HP or below, and that cash out has a lot of different possibilities. A lot of times just items, maybe some gold, but sometimes it also can give you things like a spatula or even a Tactician's Crown. So just keep in mind all those things. Scout ahead if you can, because it might help you plan if you're playing a composition that might need certain things like those spatulas. Our opening component is Glove, which tends to lean itself into more AD or melee focused compositions, but it's pretty open-ended, so you just want to see all your components before you make your plan. But immediately he's holding things like Bruisers and Maddie. That's not the best opener in the game, but it's something that you could theoretically play around Glove because you make Last Whisper Infinity Edge that can go on those 80 units. But we'll probably see him play around things like the Rebels a little bit more likely because that's just a better opener. He gets offered a set pair, so he might want to just play around that and just think about Rebels instead. Right now, Rebels is one of the best verticals in the game, and I think a lot of people think that if you can just get a Rebel emblem +1, you end up just snowballing your tempo a lot because you spike on 7 Rebel very quickly, and then you can cap out your board very high. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at these augments a little bit closer. The first thing we want to pay attention to is what is our items, and it looks like we have Glove, Belt, and Sword. So that leans itself to the AD comp that we talked about. You could try to play an AP comp, like a magic damage, if you slam things like Guard Breaker, play for Shojin. But the only reason I would ever do that is if my unit start for that is too good. Like I have Lux 2, Zyra 2, I have like Black Rose set up, or maybe I'm playing around, the Visionary. Something that just makes it really easy to play into AP. But when you have items like this, you think about AD because if you slam Infinity Edge with the Glove and the Sword, your leftover component is going to be a Belt, which is one of the best defensive components in the game because that belt can make things like Sunfire, Warmogs, so on and so forth. So with that being said, we're going to be looking at things that help us lean into the AD setup. Academy Crest is going to be a little bit tricky to play around. I don't know what the Academy items are. One trick you can use is you can open up a team planner and always click on an Academy unit, hover over the Academy trait, and it'll tell you in text what the 3 items are. Starry Night is an insane reroll augment. It's one of the best reroll augments in the game, and at gold tier, it's probably the best reroll augment. It's basically Prismatic Ticket, but better in my opinion, and it gives you gold to start things off, which is really nice. The only AD reroll comp that really wants Starry Night is Tristana, and I just don't think that he has the setup for it at the moment because usually the way you start leaning into Tristana start is if you get it on stage 1 to get the stacks early. So I think this is not a Starry Night game. And then Clear Mind is a really strong economic start. And if he wants to lean in something like Corki and Emissaries, you always want to be thinking about the Econ augment to start off like we talked about. And so I think out of all these choices, Clear Mind is the clear choice, but he also might be thinking about rerolling and evaluating. It looks like Soju actually is going to do the team planner trick. And so he hovers over Academy and it says the Academy is sponsored Spear, Shojin, Gargoyle, Swimplate, and Guardbreaker this game. That's actually not bad at all to play around because Spear Shojin is both a really good item for Jace in the top end as well as Heimerdinger. And you can also use units like Lux and Ezreal to hold them. And then Stoneplate is a pretty solid defensive item, especially if you play around, Sentinels and Solo Frontline Alawi. And then Guardbreaker is like a versatile item. So it's not bad. It's something he could think about. The only downside to this is that he doesn't really have an Academy start. He doesn't have a Lux. He doesn't have a Leona. And so it's going to be actually tricky to get 3 Academy early. And if you're going to be taking a gold augment, especially for a trait-based thing, you want to activate it as soon as you can. Otherwise, you're just going to be playing down a gold augment for a long time, and you're just going to be behind tempo. So this Academy start is actually not as good as I would like it to be. He actually thinks about it for quite some time, and he decides to roll the Academy emblem, and I agree. Again, you can't activate it immediately. He gets offered Wandering Trainer and Superstars. Superstars is mainly just to reroll things, and particularly really important on things like Family and Renata Visionary reroll, but probably not going to be for this composition. And then Wandering Trainer, it's fun, but it's really high variance. There's no such thing, unfortunately, as an Emissary emblem. So I think we're just going to go Clear Mind and just get the economic ball rolling. All right, so we do go with Clear Mind. Now, here's the thing about Clear Mind. A lot of times, it becomes a really tricky augment to play because you feel like in order to improve your board, you have to play around your pairs. Soju's actually selling to 10 and saying, I don't even want to play the pairs, right? One strategy you could have done was level, play a Irelia pair, and then, try to eventually natural it. But there's a little bit of conflicting things going on when you do that. When you play Clear Mind and you're leveling, you're actually decreasing the odds you're going to see things like Irelia. So Soju says, instead of just like putting himself in a compromised economic situation, just lean into what Clear Mind is telling you to do, which is to just, make economy and get ready for that fast state. Now, that being said, he is going to take a lot of punishment because he just sold his pairs. So his prospects for upgrading his board are basically nothing unless he gets pairs in the shop. So that's not going to happen. So he's going to lose a lot of HP in stage 2. And he also might lose a lot of HP in stage 3. Nice thing is at the end of each stage for PvE, you don't actually get penalized for holding units on your bench. So at the end of stage 2, during Krugs, at the end of stage 3 versus Raptors and Wolves, you should be able to actually hold those units and you're not going to get penalized for missing out on Clear Mind value because that would feel too bad if you couldn't even hold it during those rounds. When you compare this augment, Clear Mind, to something like Cluttered Mind, you can see the big contrast with it. Cluttered Mind lets you hold your pairs, and yes, you're losing some gold economic interest threshold, but you get to hold a bunch of these pairs. He would have had Rel pair, Irelia pair, Set pair, hold everything, and also be at the same experience thresholds. And so his prospects for being able to upgrade and maybe even start win streaking are really high. So a lot of people prefer to play around, these other economic 2-1 augments. So this one is definitely, like, Clear Mind's pretty sus, and I think a lot of people prefer not to play it. So I'm really curious to see how and when he's going to turn it around. On Carousel, looks like he's going to try to prioritize this 3-cost bow and prioritize Last Whisper. You cannot play any AD comp without Sundering right now, and if you don't have Last Whisper, Even Shroud is going to be a little bit less consistent because unless you are putting it on a super tanky unit, you're not going to actually have that tank survive very much. A lot of times you actually rather have Last Whisper on Corki and then try to go for a full defensive item on Garen. Looks like we're going to sell the Smeech and we go for Steb here. And this is because Steb allows him to make 30 gold while still playing a synergy. And he's also scouting around to see if he even should just go for a 5 loss. So he's most likely going to lose his next fight. And then after that happens, he might commit to a full sell or sell up to, his next interest threshold to try and go for a 5 loss streak and just maximize his economy. He is holding these Rebel units though, because he's still open to playing multiple things. The nice thing about this bow is that he's still open to playing Rebels because he can get things like a Rod, go for Rage Blade. If he gets double Rod, he can go Rage Blade, Dual Gauntlet, right? Rod tier, you can go for Shojin, Dual Gauntlet, things like that. And he even has the bow flexible for getting a Spatula for a Rebel emblem as well. And this is what we referenced. He actually is selling 1 unit to make that interest threshold, and he might even sell more, trying to intentionally lose and go for that 5 loss. But you notice that he's not like trying to 5 loss until you already lost 4 times, because I think a lot of players actually make the mistake of, like, if they lose 3, they feel like they have to lose 5. That's not true. Lose 3, win 2 is also pretty solid, because if you're in a spot where you can win 2 and streak going to stage 3, it's a really powerful position as well. So I like that he's kind of evaluating spot turn by turn and only committing to it when it makes sense. All right. So with that being said, we are at the creep rounds, and you can hold everything here. A lot of times, in fact, you might end up holding a good amount just to make sure you can, basically hold some units to potentially upgrade if you high roll it. So for example, he's holding this Leona because there's a chance that maybe, Leona drops out. He has Leona too, and he can just play around that. Okay, it looks like we're getting a bow drop, and we're probably going to sell to 50. And now our items have basically dictated that we kind of have to play AD. No tears, no rods. We have Last Whisper, Infinity Edge, Warmogs, right? And you can play around this bow. That's like the thing that stands out to me. When you're in this situation and you get dropped a bunch of components, think about the items that you absolutely need to make and work backwards from there. So if you are in this situation where you're thinking about AD, what's the most important thing is to take care of Sundering. So we have Last Whisper gone. That leaves us sword, belt, bow, belt, and glove. And then another item that works really well complementary to Last Whisper is Infinity Edge, so we can take out of that. And that leaves us 2 belts and a bow, which naturally makes Warmogs for our frontline item and brings really good balance to our composition. This item situation was a little bit easier than usual when you get slammed a bunch of components, but in the future, when you're thinking about it, always start with the mandatory items and then work down from there. Okay, looks like we're going to slam Last Whisper. And he actually doesn't have to slam a Warmogs here. He could actually technically keep these items open because he's on 5 loss. So if he loses another fight, that's not a big deal because he's still keeping his lose streak going and getting all of that bonus gold. But I also feel like in this situation, if you're going to wait for the carousel to pick up something that you want to make with the bow anyways, you might as well have slammed the Warmogs. So this is a really common situation where you end up just prioritizing really good frontline items with Warmogs and then just play around the best component remaining. So we end up only losing by 2 units, which is good, and we're coming up on the 3-2 augment. Not today, Crown Guarded and Clockwork Accelerator. Not today is actually quite a solid augment for any melee carry in general. Not today is really good on reroll comps. You're talking about Violet, for example, or Camille. I'm not sure if she's very common in the meta, but units like that. It's also really good on 4 costs. It's really good on Mbessa. It's really good on Vi. And so I think this is a really solid item augment to think about. Crown Guarded is buffed, but the thing about Crown Guarded is that it's much better for AP tanks. And specifically, it's really good into solo AP tanks, as in the units that just want to take all the aggression. Think about like Vex in previous sets, or Silas, or just some of those like tanks that are really good. Theoretically, this has always been like a really good item on someone like Blitzcrank for this set, but probably not what you're thinking about right now, because when you're playing emissaries, you're always going to be playing around like the 3 unit front line because you have Garen and you're trying to buff the left and the right. So Crown Guarded isn't always going to get max value unless your opponent's like AoE nuking at the very beginning or taking a bunch of single target damage. Clockwork Accelerator is actually not that bad of an augment, but it's specifically good for backline units that really want to scale their mana generation, or for compositions that stall out a ton and try to capitalize off of late game scaling. So Clockwork Accelerator is really good for Silco, for example, because Silco's a Dominator, so Shojin Nashers and Clockwork Accelerator helps him cast a lot. And then it's also really good for things like Sentinels and backline, because 6 Sentinels stalls for a long time, and Clockwork Accelerator is almost like a Gensu's Rageblade. In this scenario, I think the best option is not today. I think Clockwork Accelerator might be acceptable, but I'm not excited about it because there's no unit in our arsenal that really is excited about it. The only unit that you care about it with Clockwork Accelerator might be Jace if you put Shojin on him, but I don't really think that's important. He rolls options 2 and 3, and we have Artillerist Crest and Little Buddies. Artillerist Crest is just not really a good augment. This is partially because Artillerist as a trait is very weak, and honestly, it's one of the most disappointing traits in the game. I've played around Artillerist as much as I could vertically, and it's just not good. Just to give you frame of reference, last patch, 6 Artillerist was averaging a 4.6. And 6 Artillerist requires 2 emblems. So you're telling me 2 emblems plus hitting the vertical is averaging a 4.6. If you compare that to, 6 Automata, for example, where you only need 1 emblem and it's averaging a 3.8, 3.9, it starts to paint a picture of why Artillerist is bad, just at least in the data. There's also, like, intuitively, it's just not very good because there's not a lot of unit synergy there. And it kind of suffers the same problem as Sorcerers, for example. Little Buddies is a little bit awkward in Emissaries at times because Little Buddies basically means 3 costs provide less value on your board. If you're playing 1 and 2 costs, you get Little Buddies values for a 4 and 5 cost. Also important to note, Little Buddies doesn't work for 6 costs. So if you ever plan on capping your board with like a Victor, a Mel, or a Warwick, Little buddies didn't actually help it. And another thing to consider about little buddies on 3-2 specifically compared to 4-2 is that it doesn't do anything at the moment. And Soju's in a spot where maybe he wants a little bit higher impact to preserve his HP. There's two ways to think about it. On the one hand, he's not win streaking, so you could say, I could take little buddies now because later on I want to spike. But the other could be, I want to take not today now because I have no 4 cost and little buddies doesn't do anything and I want to preserve HP. So there's a couple ways you can think about it. I think I personally would take not today, but I'm curious what he's going to take. Okay, so he took not today, but here's a challenge. He doesn't have a good holder of it. So he puts it on a 1-star Urgot. But that's still better than Little Buddies, which literally doesn't do anything right now. And again, as we mentioned, you're going to play around a lot of 3 costs in Emissaries, so you get reduced value at times. All right, Soju is on 7 loss. I think he's going to want to try and at least win a couple of these rounds between now and stage 4, only because there's going to be some scenarios where if you are at like 30 life going into stage 4, there's going to be some really high cap boards. So he's going to try to figure out how to win a couple rounds here and there to preserve a little bit of HP. At this point, he's making 50 gold per round. You don't want to overvalue the loose streak gold because, you know, you're in a situation where if you're too low HP, you queue into an insane board, you're not going to have many lives to give late game. He ends up finding an Ezreal to play over the Urgot so he can get the Rebel in. Just those small little synergy buffs. Rebel just helps improve his front line, which is nice. On the other side, there's a Violet player with a Trench Coat, and that's an example of what's going to cap really high. You get Violet 4 with that Trench Coat. It's one of the most powerful combinations for reroll in the game. And I'm not entirely sure if he's able to beat that because they also have no scout, no pivot. So it's just a lot of combat stats for that Violet. Looks like there is a Garen off Carousel, and his items are good enough for him to take it. There's almost no scenario where you don't want to take the Garen and Mbessa off the Carousel. And this composition has so much item flexibility that you can almost use anything, even if it's Rod and Tears, which can be a little bit tricky because it's leaned more towards AP. It's totally fine. Just take the Garen and Mbessa and guarantee that you have it. Not only because you're more likely to hit the 2-star, but that way you're not in, Garen and Mbessa jail, which is a really devastating part of this composition. He finds an Ezreal pair in shop, so he can just make Ezreal 2. This is going to look really dumb. I think he's not supposed to take out this Garen or Tristana. He's going to play 2 out of 1 Emissary. So again, another situation where you have to just kind of play clear mind and minimize the value of your traits, which kind of sucks. But thankfully, he's going up against a weaker board. Looks like Dank Memes on the other side is just playing 1-star Vex, and we have 2-star Ezreal, so it should be an easy win. The fact that he's level 7 and he has a 2-star 3 cost to play around is actually a little bit higher than usual tempo for this stage, so he should be good. I think he can actually win 2 here. One thing to note is that Soju could lose 1 more going into the next stage to try and plan around the Mel's Blessing. Oh, he hit Corki and he hit the Nami, so he probably wants to play the Nami on the board and play 3 out of 1 Emissary. Oh, this is starting to get really awkward now. So he probably just sell, this Rebel unit, just play whatever he can. Somehow we keep minimizing the amount of synergies that we're playing, but I think this is entirely correct. It's much more worth getting that extra EXP value from Clear Mind than it is to try and play, 1 out of 4 Emissary correctly. Unfortunately, I think his positioning has made him vulnerable to the Rat, but his Ezreal is just doing so much single target damage. And this is a huge win if he's able to get it. And that not today kicking in very clutch. So Soju wins the 2 as we were hoping to do. He's still in a pretty good position to, sack 1 more going into 4-2 and get the Clear Mind value with the Mel's Blessing. He has another Garen, so he's actually very, very likely to hit Garen 2. So now all he has to do is just hit the Mbessa. Because he has upgraded Rel, he might not actually sell that Rel because the goal of the comp is to play 4 Emissary, upgrade frontline, and then have damage items on your Corki with your Mbessa. That's all you really care about. So that actually gives you 1, 2, maybe even 3 flexible spots. He also pre-leveled very cleanly, 46 out of 48, because he's going to get 2 EXP naturally going into the next round. And then also he gets the shop odds increase at 4 and 5 costs in case he can spike some of those units. Taking a look at his items, it's going to be a little bit awkward, but one thing you can always do in this spot is, okay, I have a lot of redundancy of the same components. So let's take these 2 cloaks, for example, and make Dragon's Claw, and then put that onto this Rel. And that gives us tier vest, tier bow. And we do have a Reforger, so we can Reforge a tier, which is kind of a useless component. That's sort of the punish of taking the Garen with a tier, but it's, the trade-off is that we get a Garen pair, and we're very likely to hit Garen 2. So let's roll down. Okay, right now we're rolling. We hit Garen 2, which is nice. No Corkies. Find an Mbessa, so we have the 4 Emissary in, and we have the link with the Rel for the Sentinel and the Conqueror. And so just going to stop rolling here, which is interesting. I guess he's trying to make sure that he has all of his items done correctly and his positioning is in place. And I actually really like this. I think a lot of players would just keep rolling and just like have it count down to the final seconds and just be like, well, if I, hit, I hit, I miss, I miss. But he's still trying to collect some clear mind value even now. And he thinks that this is good enough to win at 4-1 because he rolled earlier than everybody else. You can see that some people are still slow rolling, for their reroll comps. Some people are still waiting to 4-2. So because he went a turn earlier, he's going to stop, just collect one round of interest value and clear mind value, and then roll again. He's not by any means clear to go to level 9 because he has 1-star 4 costs across the board except for Garen. Okay, let's take a look at his 4-2 augments. Teaming up is okay. It's always a solid augment that gives you a little bit of gold. Plus, you're playing around so many 4 costs. And the random support item, there's pretty much no bad support items these days except for maybe the ZZ Rot portal and Unstable Treasure Chests. Even then, Unstable Treasure Chest got buffed, last set, and it's not as bad as it used to be. So I would say that's an okay scenario. Arcane Retribution is completely terrible. This is actually one of the worst augments in the game, period. It's kind of weird because you want your sorcerers to suicide themselves. And the only reason why this is even offered is because he has 2 sorcerer active. So it's just bad luck. I would just reroll this. Power Shields is really good in some comps that uses a lot of shields. For example, Renata reroll, whose ability shields. And you have Sentinels that also shield. It's really good in. But I don't think it's actually very good because I believe the only unit that consistently shields in this composition is Garen, unless I guess you technically get it through Scrap as well at the beginning of the fight. But yeah, you would rather play it in those kinds of comps where you get a lot of consistent shielding and not this one. Okay, so Soju actually chooses to hold option 1 as his default option, and he rolls Watcher Crest. Again, another pretty unpickable thing at this moment because we're not playing vertical Watchers, and you don't really want to splash into Watcher here. And then Bulky Buddies is just actually really awkward and bad for emissaries because you only get half of Garen's value or else you lose the Bulky Buddies, which is also bad. So I think if he's going to be defaulting to teaming up, this is what he's going to take here. I see a Corki pair in the shop. So he is going to roll and see if he can hit Corki 2. Also picking up things like Elise. You can definitely throw in Elise into this composition. Oh, wow. He's actually hitting Garen every shop, which is somehow the way it goes. Sometimes in Emissary, you just roll and get the same emissary over and over, and you're just not finding the other half. Oh dear, he actually rolled from 45 and only found Nami 2 and Tristana 2, no Mbessa and no Corki 2. And that's brutal because he loses clear mind value. He's also not going to get any scrap value off this bow, and kind of we talked about, like, his items end up being a little bit awkward. He has Edge of Night with Not Today on Mbessa, no other items. He ended up rolling all defensive items. But he ended up kind of making lemonade, right? Like he slammed the Vow and the Dragon's Claw. And because his Garen is so tanky, it's actually providing so much stall. And that Moonstone Renewer off the support item anvil actually ends up being kind of good in this spot too, because it provides him even more frontline to stall for this Corki 1. And this goes to show you that Corki 1 can still do a lot of damage as long as your frontline is good. Let this be a lesson. You don't have to always just roll for your 2-star 4 cost, carry immediately if your frontline is tanky enough. Okay, that being said, we're going to roll it down again. At this point, I think he's getting very frustrated because he picked up Mbessa. And so now he's going to have to hold his Mbessa pair. And so now, even if he hits his Corki 2, he can't sell the Mbessa. And once again, he's losing clear mind value. He's also tossing in the Sentinels and Form Swapper to see if he wants to get the Scrap, because that Scrap is technically worth an extra item. But he's 1 turn away from the Carousel. So this game is definitely full of a bunch of awkward moments that are just like, he's getting some value here and losing others, and I think that's the trade-off you have to constantly, have a tug of war with when you're playing emissaries. But being flexible and open is really important for that. Okay, that being said, he rolled so much gold, and he has Corki 2, and he has Garen. Part of the reason why you need that economic augment, look how much gold he needed to hit only 2 of like the 3 or 4 units that he needs at his core. All right, but now we're winning, and guess what? We're on a 5 streak, and things are looking good. If I'm in his position, I might even be willing to take the Mbessa off Carousel just to get some clear mind value. And Mbessa on Carousel is worth +3 gold because you get that 3 EXP from the clear mind. We do have an open bow though. Usually the last time you're looking for is Giant Slayer, so he's gonna want to go for that 2-cost sword if possible on Corki. Looks like his opponent took it, so maybe we'll take a glove instead. Looks like we're here to look at the Mel's cash out, and it's going to be 4 components. So that's actually a good thing. So it means that he doesn't have to slam some of these other components as well. Like he could save a tier in the glove and say, hey, I don't want to slam a Hand of Justice because, maybe I want to play something else instead. It just gives him options at his disposal. He doesn't actually have to slam anything here. Interesting. He actually chooses to go for a Hand of Justice. I think this is probably just because he recognizes that Corki is his 2-star carry, and the bow that scraps can end up turning into like an awkward item. Like let's say it turns into a Gnasher's Tooth or a Shiv, things that he doesn't really want. So he'd rather have the Hand of Justice to guarantee value. And then he has an extra remover later on. He can use that remover to guarantee move it to like Mbessa later. Okay, anomaly time. Let's see what he ends up going for anomaly. This first one, he's already thinking about power absorption. So let's talk a little bit about power absorption here. This one gains 30 AD, which is fine. It's about half of a Death Blade. And then every time an ally dies, you get 9% of their AD. And that's better the more high AD things that you have. So, for example, when you're playing a trait like Rebels, all Rebels get attack damage. And so that ends up being really good because you get a lot of their AD as well. But in Emissaries is a lot more like bonus HP, bonus attack speed, bonus mana. So it's not as high value as it is in other traits, but still like something to take. And one thing to keep in mind is that he has 18 gold. So you don't really want to be too picky. In the ideal scenario, you pick within your first 12 rolls. In case you guys haven't heard, the anomaly change has made it so that way you get 12 unique options offered before you can start seeing repeats. So he could roll a little bit more, but he is low gold count. So I think if he wants to be conservative, you can take it, but you can roll past it. He doesn't end up taking though, and I think that's the right call. I think you should just be conservative, make sure to save your gold, because ultimately with this comp, you need to be able to get to 9. The more gold you spend, the more likelihood you're stuck on 8, because he still is holding an Mbessa pair. And he just really doesn't want to be stuck in a situation where he can't ever go to 9. Looks like he reforges a rod, makes a Bloodthirster, commits to a red buff. I see he wants the anti-heal, and he's putting the red buff on Nami. So this all makes sense. Now he has his utility covered. He has anti-heal, and he has armor sundering. And then this last tier could be a bunch of different things. It could just be a Hand of Justice. It could just be another utility item. He can even reforge that tier into something else. It's kind of brutal that he had this Mbessa though for so long because it's cost 9 EXP. He would be at 22 to 76, which is way farther along the line for level 9. So definitely one of the things that he wants to consider is just, can he get this Mbessa 2 on the board? He's thinking about whether or not he wants to even just sell the Irelia, give up Sentinels entirely so he can keep getting his Clear Mind value. But his HP count is just flirting with disaster because starting on stage 5, you take 11 base damage guaranteed for losing by 1 unit. So he's basically at 3.5 lives. You don't want to be taking too much damage here for, sacking rounds to try to go to 9. Man, he's really dancing with decision. He chooses to commit to it, puts the Mbessa on the board, sells the Irelia, and says he's going to sack and go to 9. Reforges the rod, gets a belt, and so I guess he could go for a guard breaker, last item here on Corki. And again, it kind of goes back to what we're talking about. He knows he eventually moves the Hodges over. That Hodge can go onto Mbessa, and then he can put a third damage item on Corki. Guardbreaker has synergy with Infinity Edge because Infinity Edge converts that crit. Just in general, as a rule of thumb, if you have crit items like Jewel Gauntlet and Infinity Edge, glove-based items tend to be performing a little better to get more crit. Ends up getting a very crucial win here because, again, he did sack his Sentinels. And this, I believe, is a natural interval to go to 9, and he has a unit he could play. So he's thinking about leveling to play Twist of Fate. He's just doing the math here, but yes, 56 is a clean interval. Okay, he chooses against it. Looks like he'd rather sack 2 more rounds and get to 9. And this isn't deliberately intentional because let's say he does level here. He's not going to have any gold to roll and hit Mbessa 2. If he goes now, he has 7 gold. And that 7 gold with 1 roll has to hit Mbessa 2. And that's not to say that he needs to actually find a better units, right? He wants to play Rumble, and he wants to play some higher quality 5 and 6 costs. So he's not going to have the gold to roll. So he chooses not to and ends up getting rewarded. And now because he won this fight, he cashes out, by the way. Oh, that's a Leona 2. Okay, so that's a unit he can play as well. And then he 1 rolls into Mbessa. I guess if he believed in the previous turn, he would have had the 1 roll Mbessa. So that is a high roll. But, again, this is like now he's in a much better economic position because he has 15 as opposed to the 7. He can make a little bit of gold. And now he has the opportunity of, being able to save up a little econ while improving his board. Going up against a Twitch board with Mundo 1. So that shouldn't be too big of an issue. I think Mundo 1, way too fragile of a unit, but his opponent's very healthy. And she's also trying to go to 9. And now the comeback is mainly complete because he was able to very cleanly streak at the end of stage 3 going to stage 5 now. He has actually built up enough of an HP lead that he should be guaranteed top 4. And this is where Emissary can really shine. Ends up taking a Steadfast here. I guess he feels like his front line's a little bit too weak and he has enough frontline items. Probably going to put this on a Sentinel. Looking for a better Quick Striker unit or just a better unit to play over Akali. Akali is just Synergy Bot, but one of the packages you can play is playing Twist of Fate and then Loris, for example, and replacing the Leona. But at this point, he's going for unit quality over just kind of the cookie cutter stuff. And this is what makes Emissary Flex really interesting to a lot of players. This Quick Striker is just purely to make Mbessa a little bit better. It doesn't actually make Corki better, so it's totally fine to replace this Quick Striker if you find Victor, or if you find something else that's just strictly better. And it looks like he's barely cleaning up some of these small fights. The Rebel player is also down. And we are good to go. That is top 5. And I wonder if Soju can get to level 10 here. So if he waits one more turn, it's going to be 16 out of 84, then 18 out of 84. It's going to be a little bit close, but then I can actually get there at 10. But if he can get to 10, he can splash in yet more synergies and maybe unlock some of the power of the 6 costs. He does end up moving the Corki away from the corner. I guess he saw that there were some corner threats. But by moving the Corki away from the Mbessa, now Corki is shredding a unit that Mbessa is not attacking. So there's a little bit of positional anti-synergy there. And like Mbessa is, as a result, killing things a little bit slower than he would like to. The fight's very close, but looks like he squeezes it out just a little bit too tanky. This Garen is very difficult to deal with. So he's 68 gold off right now. So he's got to make up about 1 or 2 turns to get to 10. And then the question is, does he even have a unit to play on 10? This Malzahar, for example, is fine to play. He's just, a 5 cost. You have a Visionary with Rel that you can tag in. It's also totally fine. But you also just sell it and just play something else better. Malzahar 1, unfortunately, this patch got nerfed really, really hard. If he wastes one more turn, he's going to be 23 out of 84, which means it'll be 60 to level. So he'll have about like 10 to 15 gold to roll. And that gives him, 5 chances to hit something pretty meaningful. He's going to position to the left side because Twitch can't really move. So he can try to favor that side. Oh, and also try to go on the other side of the Violet player. And now this Violet player is at full power, has True Biss, which is Serix Gauge and Edger Knight on top of the trench coat. That setup is just insane because it's just like hit that 50% HP mark and then, Violet goes crazy with all the stats. Yeah, you can see this Violet form just does way too much damage, especially with no scout, no pivot. Oh, actually, he's holding units on his bench, so he doesn't actually get the extra EXP, but I think that's totally fine. He gets the 4 costs out of the Conqueror, so it gets a little bit extra gold, which is nice. He hits a Loris and a Caitlyn, but I don't think that's like particularly good here. Looking for a better Quick Striker. I always like Jace. He's good utility. And this is one of those things where like going to 10, he actually improved his board a little bit. This Malzahar 1, I guess, is nice, but Visionary is not going to be moving the needle very much here. It's just nice to get like, a little bit extra oomph on your board. These are the spots where you want to splash in the 6 cost. Looks like he's going to beat up on somebody who is stuck on level 8, though. And I believe that is a top 3. Okay, a couple more rolls. Finds a Warwick. Probably better than the Malzahar, honestly, because the Warwick might help execute. And again, you're not even doing much magic damage, so it's probably fine. He finds a Rumble, so he can replace the Leona and then get the scrap value. One tip about Warwick, putting him in the back line actually gives him more time to trigger his passive. There's a video actually circulating out there that you should corner your Warwick. I don't think so always, but it's an option you can think about. So now you can see this Warwick is running around and actually trying to contribute a little bit of DPS and maybe even finish off some targets. And Soju might be in a position to secure this second. I don't know we can beat Violet 4, but I think his board has kind of proven the point that this Emissary comp is very powerful. And maybe he doesn't beat some of the Exodia setups, but it is indeed very good. Thinking about taking this Rumble 2. All right, that's Rumble pair. So he still needs to roll and find Rumble 2. That's okay. At this point, level 10, there's no clear mind value, so you can just roll it down. Mel gives you some extra shield to your front line, so it's another utility that you can take. Warwick is more damage. Mel's a little bit more defensiveness. And he hits Rumble 2 and slams the Archangel. His board is done. His game is pretty much done. He can't really meaningfully improve his board unless he wants to get rid of the Akali, and that's probably just not going to happen for a while. And I don't even think this Banished Mage effect for Mel giving an extra life is going to matter very much, because in the 1v1, that extra life only gives you 1 turn to hit what you need, and he already hit pretty much everything he needs at the moment. And if he doesn't win versus this Ghost, I'm pretty sure it's just a second. And Violet explodes, uppercuts, and one-shots everything. And I think that pretty much determines what's going to happen here. So I think it's going to be a second. Actually, he's going to just surrender. Totally fine. And that is a solid top 2 for rank 1 in North America. What a masterclass performance by rank 1 North America himself, K3soju. And I hope that game goes to show you just how powerful, dynamic, and fun Emissary Flex can be, because he was, mixing and matching all kinds of units. It's not cookie cutter at all. So just be very dynamic and understand what the main goalposts are. Your roll timings can be a little bit different depending on what you have and what you don't have. Thanks for watching. Hope you guys learned a thing or two from this video, and I'll catch you guys next time.